Hey listeners, Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to take just a quick moment to tell you about another show on our podcast network that I know you'll love. In Your Element, hosted by Brendan Henkel and Daniela Norden, is a podcast bridging the gap between leadership and real talk in the dynamic world of higher ed. Every episode is a deep dive into the practical side of working in higher ed, featuring real-world tips, best practices, and use cases from Element 451 users. Join our hosts as they bring on savvy IT leaders, visionary college presidents, and leading voices in the field to share their experiences and insights. From the challenges to the triumphs of higher ed, In Your Element is your source for candid discussions, innovative strategies, and the impactful use of technology, especially AI, in personalizing the student journey. You can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or by searching for In Your Element wherever you get your podcasts.
So we're not measuring performance or trying to predict anything there. And professors can't see it, which I think we always struggle with. Who's going to see my data? And as a student, I think even if they tell you they're not looking, I think you'd be kind of worried about that, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I like the idea that professors can't see it either. I think you need to be blind to that in the moment. But that activity data, like you said, is going to be really invaluable when you look at it at the scale of the university or at the scale of the product across multiple universities to really start to understand how behavior and grades correlate. And of course, there's going to be a lot of variance there. Some students are just going to be more apt to a subject and are not going to do as much reading and still do fine. But other students, you may be able to find a correlation between lack of engagement with the course content and poor grade performance.
Welcome to the EduData Podcast, a podcast that serves as your weekly guide to the data driving higher education. We are your hosts. I'm Jamie Boggs.
And I'm Timothy Davis. Join us every Friday for weekly breakdowns of the most important data, trends, and topics in higher education.
The EduData Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below.
Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.
Hello and welcome to the EduData Podcast. I am Jamie here with Timothy. What's happening?
Hey, Jamie, how's it going today?
It's going pretty well. I was coming off of recording the March Madness episode.
Yep.
Probably the most fun I've had on this podcast. And I'm also super pumped up for today, though. So
Yeah, I think that today's going to be a really interesting one, too. But yeah, March Madness was great. We finally have some champions.
We do.
Did it pan out the way you thought it was? The way you thought it would?
Yeah, UConn seemed to be the best team all season, and they've won back-to-back now. So now we can go check their admission numbers, see if back-to-back does anything. That's pretty rare. It hasn't happened since Florida like 18 years ago.
What I really want to know is how admissions and application information will change for maybe Iowa and South Carolina who played in the women's game, because the women's game netted like an additional million or maybe even 2 million viewers of their championship game over the men's for the first time in history, I believe.
Yeah, it was a much better basketball game and better stories all around the women's game this March, which was awesome to see. But between and UConn's been the dominant force in women's basketball for decades, but those two schools are, I don't know, kind of new to the dominance. So
yeah, South Carolina. Now, did South Carolina repeat? I think that they're back-to-back champions again now, too. Undefeated season. Incredible.
Yeah, they're in the middle of a big run.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we'll have to keep an eye on that, maybe do a follow-up episode to March Madness. But today, we're talking about something else. What do you got for us?
We are. So I've been looking at some recent developments from a new service that Canvas, the LMS, is offering, and there are 8 schools taking advantage of this. And basically what they're providing is a student-facing dashboard that pulls in data from their peers within a class that enables the dashboard so they can see how their habits, activities, and performance compares to the rest of the classroom. So this goes as far as you can look, if a student's looking at their dashboard, they can go through Canvas and they can see 86% of my class has clicked on this link, 42% has watched this video, 80% have downloaded this paper that we're supposed to read. And you can go and look at performance. Like, I got a 75 on this assignment. The class average was 92, the lowest was 48, the highest was 100. Like, it's a full comparison dashboard for students to let them know how they are measuring up to their peers in the classroom. So first reaction from you, like, as somebody who works with data all the time, you and I build a lot of dashboards for Element 451. Is this helpful for students?
Oh, I think absolutely. I love this idea. I love the idea of putting more data, not just more control over their data, but more data in general in front of students. I think that that's a great idea. I mean, the trend has kind of been giving students more control over their digital representation in a student information system or in the database, the data that schools hold about them, right? So allowing them to update their email, allowing them to enroll in their own courses, right? So just giving them more control over their educational experience through the data that you provide or the products that you provide, the software premise, but now actually giving them information and transparency about their performance in class, which is something that they're really concerned about, that they want to know about, and not keeping that behind a wall or waiting until, the end of a term to sort of reveal their final grades, letting them see that as it unfolds and also letting them just situate themselves amongst their peers, I think is really interesting and is going to be really helpful. I like it a lot.
Yeah, the article that I stumbled upon focuses on the University of Michigan and their usage of it. And it says that there were 670 courses that used it during pilot period and reached almost 40,000 students. And they did survey the students afterwards, and 60% of them said that it was influential for their habits, for their studying, preparing for exams. 89% said that they found it to be valuable for their overall performance. So,
yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. Like, I mean, I remember my time in the classroom, both at the high school level and in the college level. Like, what is my grade was always a huge question mark. And I believe in that article, there was also mention of a survey that said that I think 59, maybe 60% of students surveyed, you'll have to quote me on that, said that the grade is what they measure their academic success by. And I think that's a fine metric to grade yourself on. It's also one that, you use a lot in high school, so one that you're really comfortable with. But in a lot of situations, that grade is really opaque, is hardly ever real time unless all of your graded assignments can be automatically graded when you submit them. And in some cases, like with quizzes, LMSs are pretty good about doing that. But if it's like graded papers or other in-class assignments that don't have a digital presence, that are entirely offline, it takes some time. And so again, just like the ability to have more transparency, more control, more democratization, as we like to say, of that data for students is a good thing in my book.
Yeah, so you're spot on. 59%, according to the survey, say that they measure their success based on their GPA. 54% say just on their knowledge. And then 53% say completing a degree or program. And then just acquiring a job. And then how much money you make in that job was 46%. Obviously, those don't add up to 100, as people can find more than one meaning in success, but I would have expected the GPA to be higher. I would have expected GPA to be up around 90 and then graduating not far behind. So I was a bit surprised by that, because we are so ingrained to think about that as our success point in high school. People are praised for their GPAs, and you make the AB honor roll starting when you're in like third grade. So it's
right.
It starts early for us. The primary concern that I had, and the angle that I took in looking at this with the dashboarding peer comparisons, was also noted in this article, and that's students' perception of themselves, comparing themselves to their peers. Because if I'm in a class and I I can kind of guide based on class discussion, like, whoa, some of these people know more than me or whatever. But at this point, you're fully saying to a student that may be behind in the course, you are way behind everybody. Everybody has read this stuff you haven't read. Everybody is getting better grades than you. And what does that do to students' self-assessment, self-appreciation, self-efficacy, and how does that ultimately lead to their, or how does it impact their performance? So are we gonna see a divide here where people see their performance? I'm doing better than everybody. I'm gonna kill it and keep doing better. I'm doing worse than everybody. I'm gonna give up. Or is it gonna be kind of the rising tide lifts all boats scenario? So what are your thoughts on that concern? Just before I go into some other data with that.
Just in general, being excited about and in favor of putting more data in general in front of students. This sort of performance ranking, I mean, I think it's gonna, I think it'll be kind of dependent on the culture of the class, with the instructor, and then also sort of dependent on the services and the support that students can access. Because yes, it could perhaps go either way with students that are struggling, right? Some students may say, I'm not doing good. I'm already so far behind my peer group. Like, what's the point? I'm just, maybe I'm going to go to practice and start skipping this class, or, maybe I'll just stay in my dorm and play video games, and, I won't care about this class anymore because there's no way I'm going to catch up. But if you have support, if you have structures in place that can identify these students and meet them proactively, right, and try to help them through that, then yeah, I think that students have a great chance of recovering from that and of moving forward. But I know you're also going to talk about some of the potential psychological effects. So do you want to share that first? I've got some thoughts on that too, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Let's start out with the big fish, little pond effect, which is a pretty common concept in higher ed theories about essentially that, comparing yourself. Am I somebody who stands out amongst my peers? Do I belong? It kind of goes into imposter syndrome. A lot of people, especially first generation college students, go to college and they're like, I don't belong here, and everything that happens to them reinforces that. So the big fish little pond effect is measuring how that comparison impacts your academic self concept. So psychologically, what does it do to my confidence by seeing that I'm ahead of, on board with, or behind my peers? And a lot of the studies that I found are pretty clear that academic self-concept does directly impact academic performance, which is, I think, why, I don't know, some professors will not give grades, or they'll do it differently to try to build up students, while others are still pretty rigid. Like, this is higher education. If you want to succeed here, you've got to put the work in, kind of thing. So I think there are different angles of how to attack that. But with that perception impacting achievement, what does this big fish, little pond effect, which could be caused or emphasized with these dashboards, how will that impact their self-concepts? So that's the psychological piece that I was kind of referring to, of self-defeating, leading to lower performance. Your response to that?
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I think it could go either way. That's definitely something to study. I'll be interested to see kind of what a year long, or maybe a 2-3 year longitudinal study kind of looks like with these, as we start to examine more cohorts and as these products stay on the market longer. I think that ultimately it's going to be helpful. I mean, even for students that are lagging behind. One of the ways I think so is just because that data is informative. It can inform you of your own sort of placement for everybody, not just for people who are maybe first generation in higher education. The college years, the high school years are really formative for identity, right? You're always trying to sort of understand yourself, define yourself. And when you can sort of start to place yourself amongst your peers and get a sense of how you perform, at least in the classroom, that can be a component of that. And then you can also use that data to sort of shape your own self-narrative, right? Even if you are lagging behind, you can see that data and you can start to make sense of it. Even if you disagree with it, you can start to understand the factors that are going into that. I think just in general, the data prompts that sort of self-reflection. So again, I think putting data in front of students, aggregate data, even if that data is not necessarily positive for them or could be interpreted negatively for them, I think that it's ultimately going to be a good thing, because it just empowers students. It empowers people to understand more, right? And just knowledge for knowledge's sake in that sense.
Right. And I think I agree with you. I think a lot of the academic self-perception comes from.
Hey, it's Mallory. Exciting news! I'm hosting the Engage Summit in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th, and I'd love to meet you there. Together, we'll dive into the mind of the modern student, what fires them up, how they interact, and what they expect in today's digital age, and how tools like AI help put them in the driver's seat of their education. We have some terrific speakers, including our closing keynote, New York Times best-selling author Jeff Selingo. Sessions will dig into practical ideas and innovative strategies to get your team more student-centered and ready to adopt AI. And many of your favorite Enrollify hosts are presenting too, like Jamie Hunt, Jenny Lee Fowler, and Brian Gross. Use the discount code Enrollify50 for an extra $50 off your registration. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there.
Observations that don't matter as much. Like if somebody talks a lot in class, I'm going to assume they know more than me. But there are people that just talk, right? Like that's not a comparison of how much I know versus how much they know necessarily. So we have students who are attributing their own self-confidence based on observations and things that they interact with that aren't meaningful. And this dashboard is showing very objective performance. So if it was just the grade or just the aggregate performance, I would struggle with it. But I absolutely love the tracking of the usage of what's happening there. Because if I'm struggling, I can see, well, I haven't clicked on this link a lot, and it looks like my whole class has read this. Maybe if I want to improve my grade, I need to go more toward these resources that are being provided that I haven't used yet. And I think we can put resources in front of students all day, but if I give them 6 links and say, go read all these, it's hard for them to know which ones are really going to be the most impactful. And that may be different per student as well. But I love the resource tracking. Also, an important piece of this practice is that professors don't get to see this information. They don't get to see that you only clicked on 5 links instead of 6, or that, of course, they know the grade spread, right? Because they're the ones giving the grades, but they don't get to see your behavior. And you and I talk a lot about actionable behavior research and using those actions for research. But at this point, that's not being used as any kind of in any measurement for performance, or even how many clicks did you have and then what was your grade. So we're not measuring performance or trying to predict anything there. And professors can't see it, which I think we always struggle with. Who's going to see my data? And as a student, I think even if they tell you they're not looking, I think you'd be kind of worried about that, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I like the idea that professors can't see it either. I think you need to be blind to that in the moment. But that activity data, like you said, is going to be really invaluable when you look at it at the scale of the university or at the scale of the product across multiple universities to really start to understand how behavior and grades correlate. And of course, there's going to be a lot of variance there. Some students are just going to be more apt to a subject and are not going to do as much reading and still be fine. But other students, you may be able to find a correlation between lack of engagement with the course content and poor grade performance. So yeah, I think that's going to be really important for just the field of learning. I mean, we're getting more data about student behavior, and I think that's ultimately going to be really good.
There are 2 statistical pieces here I think that are important. One is how much does academic self-concept impact achievement, but the bigger piece that I struggle with here, does peer comparison impact concept. And there are a lot of studies out there. Stanford put out a really good one, and they said it kind of reaffirms that does make an impact. But I also found this study from Yang Yan and Zhang, as well as Baud and Datu, that I'll link out in the show notes, that is basically saying that there are research methods that can be altered to that, essentially that there is an artifact in the numbers that is causing the significance and potential causality of that they think that they've removed, and in one of their recent studies, and they believe that there is no direct or at least significant impact of peer comparison to self-concept. So that is I think if you're able, and that's very recent, that's the most recent research that I found. So I think thoughts about this are trending away from the traditional roles of, if you let them know everybody's doing well, they're going to struggle. So like I said, there are 8 schools trying this with Canvas now. Other schools and other tools, I assume, will start to experience this as well, or at least experiment with it. But I think there are definitely some pros, and I would love to see some research on the other side of it. Of course, even though they're not showing that to professors, they're tracking it, right? And we can look at it in the aggregate without getting in the PII or without it impacting individual perceptions of students. So I would love to take a deeper look at that later on.
Yeah, we'll have to definitely keep our thumb on self-concept research and see how that sort of evolves over time, especially with this new information. The other thing to talk about related to this, I think would be interesting to our listeners, is kind of what I mentioned at the top, is that this type of product, right, that's coming out through Canvas and through probably some other platform providers, software providers, is a transition to data products that are not just focused on staff users, but on student users. And I think that that's a really interesting trend. And when we talk about software, we tend to talk about it in terms of product, right? We both work for a software product company, and we are on a sort of data product team. So data products being a subset of the overall product. But again, I think bringing data products in front of students across a variety of fronts is going to be really interesting. Not just giving them the control of their data in the database, but also giving them access to a wider set of information so that they can make their own data-informed decisions. Do you have thoughts on that?
As humans, we're always curious. So I think the more that if you were just to show me a heat map of my web usage, I would be like, where am I clicking? Am I more likely to scroll on certain topics? I would be interested in looking at that, because I have my own behavior, but it's not something I think about a lot. I think we would be curious to see what our behavior is like compared to, compare that to whatever. I think anything that we can provide that can help students make decisions off actual information, not perceptions off of actual behavior, I think we should provide that. And it's so easy now with so many tools that do track behavior, whether that's behavior on a web page, whether that's login information, texting information. I love that my phone tells me how much screen time I had every week, because that kind of holds me a little bit accountable to say, God, you were on your phone so much. But other softwares aren't doing that, at least right now. So not a lot are. So I love the idea of getting this in front of them, and also adding kind of a gamification piece to it of, yes, you've done these things. Let's see what else I can check off here. Maybe there can be some kind of trigger in this that if you access 5 resources, you automatically get a bonus grade of some kind, or what, like, let's make it, now that we're tracking actual behavior, not just what you're turning in, let's make that a part of the scenario and help that use that to help establish good habits and good practices.
Outside of dashboards, which I think are going to be more popular for students, that can help them understand their grades and their academic performance, but even their admissions process, a dashboard about their status in the admissions process, or maybe the status of the university's admissions process, just so that they can get a sense of what's going on behind the scenes. I think we're definitely going to see more dashboards, but I also think that we're going to see data used around content. So I'm thinking of like website pages, that say, X amount of students found this webpage helpful, or even much more targeted than that. Like if a student is at a certain point of the application, or if a student is waiting on their decision, the university surfacing content for them and saying, students when waiting on their decision, or students at this point in the application found these resources helpful, check these out. So stuff like that, just basically using the data that we have to serve up our content better and to meet students where they're at with the information they need at the time they need it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And even on the negative side of it, it looks like anybody who has started their application has been Googling multiple times, what is the admissions timeline or whatever it is. Like, how can we let them know when things should actually be doing a little better? Of course, we're in a place where we're blasted with information, so I'm sure we're told things all the time that we just completely ignore. So how can we make sure that people aren't ignoring this information, or they're getting it in a more consumable way based on things they're not doing or things that they're not understanding, in addition to those positive things of what are people responding to? So we talk about it often is let's use this behavior data, and we have more of it than ever. Let's put it to use to make it better for ourselves and for the student experience.
Absolutely. So lots to pay attention to related to this, both from the product side and from the self-concept and the research front.
Yeah, and as more research becomes available from that, we'll definitely be digging into it and sharing any important findings here. But I love the concept. I do have those concerns of the academic self-concept, big fish, little pond theories, but I want to see the data. This is something that hasn't been tested as much, so let's have a look.
All right, well, I think we can go ahead and wrap this episode up. Thanks for bringing up this topic, Jamie. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And for our listeners, we'll see you in the next episode.
The EduData podcast is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month. We've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional.
Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Artis Cadu, Dustin Ramsdale, Jeremy Tiers, and so many of your other favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.